"You picked the wrong place." She said it quietly. No trembling, no tears. Just 3 words aimed straight at the man gripping her arm like she was property he'd already decided to take. Victor Kane stared at her, this waitress, this nobody, and for 1 second something flickered behind his eyes. Not respect, not yet, just confusion. Because women who worked roadside bars in forgotten Arizona towns didn't talk back. They handed over the money and looked at the floor. Emily Parker was not that woman. Before we go any further, if you found this story, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this one travels. Now let's go back to that Thursday night, because what happened next changed everything. The Desert Rose Bar sat at the edge of a 2-lane highway that most people only drove through when they were heading somewhere else. It wasn't the kind of place that ended up on travel blogs or got written up in weekend guides. It had 12 bar stools, 7 tables with mismatched chairs, a jukebox that skipped on track 4, no matter what you did, and a neon sign out front that buzzed just loud enough to hear from the parking lot on quiet nights. The kind of place where the regulars knew which stool belonged to who and never sat in someone else's spot out of a courtesy that had never been spoken aloud but everybody understood. Emily had worked there for 3 years. She'd taken the job at 23 fresh off a bad situation that had left her with a 6-year-old daughter, an empty bank account, and exactly 2 references. Michael Walker had looked at her resume for about 4 seconds, set it face down on the bar and said, "Can you start Thursday?" That was it. No long interview, no background check lecture, just a man who seemed to understand that sometimes what a person needed most was for someone to stop asking questions and just give them a shot. She never forgot that. Over 3 years, she'd learned things about the Desert Rose that a stranger would never notice. She knew that the Tuesday lunch crowd was mostly retired men who ordered the same thing every week and needed about 20 extra minutes before they were ready for the check. She knew that the highway patrol officer named Dale always sat at the end of the bar, not because he was watching for trouble, but because the corner had the best angle on the parking lot and old habits died hard. She knew that Michael kept a jar of hard candy behind the register for any kid who came in with their parents, and that he'd been doing it so long, he'd never once mentioned it to anyone. It was just there, always full, because he made sure of it. She knew Michael Walker, or she thought she did. At 26, Emily had built something fragile and real here. Routine, stability. Her daughter Lily was in 1st grade, now learning to read chapter books, obsessed with horses, even though she'd never been near one. And she needed a mother who came home every night and paid the rent on time. The Desert Rose Bar was how Emily made that happen. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what she'd imagined for herself when she was younger. But it was hers, and she protected it the way she protected everything she'd built from scratch, with everything she had. Thursday had started the same as any other night. She'd done the dinner rush, cleared a birthday party in the back corner, wiped down tables, restocked the well, argued gently with Dale about whether the chili needed more cumin. It did, he always said it didn't, and started the closing count at 11:15. The last regular left at 11:40. She was supposed to be out the door before midnight. Michael always checked in at midnight, every single night. She'd asked him once why he did it, and he'd looked at her with that quiet way he had of answering questions that weren't quite what you were really asking. Because that's when trouble tends to show up, he'd said, right when people think everyone's gone home. She hadn't understood it then. She understood it now. The 3 men came through the door at 11:52. She knew immediately something was wrong. It wasn't the way they looked. Plenty of rough-looking people came through that door and turned out to be the most polite customers she'd ever served. It wasn't the hour late-night walk-ins happened. It was something else. The way they moved, too deliberate, too coordinated, like they'd already talked about this before they got out of the truck, like they already knew how the next 10 minutes were supposed to go. The one in front was older, maybe mid-40s, with a jaw like a cinder block and eyes that didn't do the normal thing eyes did when you entered a new place. Most people's eyes moved around when they walked in somewhere, taking inventory, getting comfortable. This man's eyes went straight to the register, then to the back hallway, then to Emily. Not in a curious way, in an evaluating way. "We're closed," Emily said. She kept her voice level. She was still behind the bar, and there was a solid counter between her and them, and she held on to that fact like it was something. "Kitchen closed," the man said. "We don't need the kitchen." His voice was flat in that particular way, that some men worked very hard to cultivate because they thought it made them sound dangerous. Emily had grown up around a certain kind of man, and she'd learned early that the genuinely dangerous ones rarely bothered to sound that way. They didn't need to. Bars closed too, she said. He looked at the two men flanking him, and something passed between them. A look, a confirmation. Then he pulled out a stool and sat down like she hadn't spoken. I'm Victor, he said, Victor Kane, and you're going to want to hear what I have to say before you decide how this conversation goes. From the corner of her eye, Emily saw the two remaining customers, a couple who'd been nursing drinks in the far booth, quietly trying to become invisible. The man had his hand over the woman's hand on the table. Not romantic, protective. Mr. Kane, Emily said, I don't know what you think this is, but protection, Victor said simply. He folded his hands on the bar like he was about to explain something to a child. Every business in this corridor pays a monthly fee. It keeps things running smooth, keeps problems from showing up. He glanced around the bar with a slow deliberateness. Keeps accidents from happening. Emily felt the temperature in the room drop about 10 degrees. She'd heard about this, not specific names, not specific operations, but the general shape of it, businesses along the highway corridor being squeezed by people who'd figured out that isolated towns with limited law enforcement response times were profitable hunting grounds. She'd heard it the way you hear things in small towns, secondhand and fragmentary, always about someone else, somewhere else, not here. But here it was, right in front of her. Desert Rose doesn't have that arrangement, she said. It does now, Victor said. He reached into his jacket and put a folded piece of paper on the bar. That's the number, monthly. First of every month. You give me a name and a contact, we set up the payment, everybody's happy. Emily didn't touch the paper. Victor watched her not touch it. Something shifted in his expression. He wasn't used to that response. This isn't a negotiation, he said. I'm being polite because I don't know you yet. That can change. I hear you, Emily said. And I'm telling you, this bar belongs to Michael Walker. Anything you want to discuss, you discuss with him. Michael Walker, Victor repeated the name. Let it sit there. Old man who runs this place. Retired, quiet, keeps to himself. He nodded slowly like he was confirming something he'd already known. Yeah, we looked into Michael Walker. He's not going to be a problem. Something about the way he said it made Emily's stomach go cold because she heard what he wasn't saying. They'd done their research. They thought they knew exactly what kind of man Michael Walker was. They thought the quiet bar owner with the gray in his hair and the coffee and the candy jar was exactly what he appeared to be. They had no idea. Open the register, Victor said. No. The word came out before she'd fully decided to say it. It wasn't bravery exactly. It was something simpler and more stubborn than that. The register was Michael's. The money in it was from 3 years of him showing up before anyone else and leaving after everyone was gone. It was from Emily's shifts and from Dale's coffee and from the birthday party and the truck drivers and the regulars with their assigned stools. Victor was not going to reach into it like it belonged to him. Excuse me, Victor said. I said no, Emily said. I'm not opening the register for you. I don't know you. You haven't shown me any identification, any documentation, any reason at all to think this is a legitimate arrangement. You walked in here at closing time and you're making threats. That's not how this works. The couple in the booth were absolutely motionless now. Victor stared at her. She watched something harden in his face. You're a waitress, he said. The word landed with a particular kind of contempt. This isn't your call to make. Everything that happens in this bar while I'm the only one here is my call to make, she said. That's how employment works. One of the men behind Victor made a sound that might have been a laugh. Victor stood up from the stool, and that was when the night changed. He moved around the bar, not fast, not frantic, just steady and certain, like a man who expected no resistance, and grabbed her arm just above the elbow. His grip was hard, the kind of grip that communicated that this was the gentlest version of what he was capable of. Open it, he said. Emily looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. You picked the wrong place, she said. Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound, short and dismissive, the kind of laugh designed to make a person feel small. He turned to his men. You hear that? But neither of them was laughing, because both of them had heard something from outside, something low and far away and growing. Emily had heard it too. She'd heard that sound before in the distance on nights when the desert was very quiet. but never this many, never this close together. The sound was rolling across the flat, dark highway like something inevitable, like weather, like the specific frequency of a world that was about to shift on its axis. Victor heard it a half-second later than everyone else in the room. She watched his expression change, not dramatically, not all at once, but in that incremental way that real fear worked its way through a person who didn't have enough practice recognizing it in themselves. "What is that?" one of his men said. Victor didn't answer because the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a surge, just off. Complete darkness, sudden and total, the neon sign going quiet for the first time all night, the hum of the beer coolers dying, the jukebox cutting mid-song, and then there was nothing but the sound from outside getting closer and closer until it wasn't something in the distance anymore. It was here. Victor's grip on her arm loosened, not completely, not voluntarily, but loosened because his attention had fragmented. She could feel it. His mind was somewhere else now, doing math he didn't want to be doing. Then the headlights hit the windows, dozens of them, and the sound stopped. Not gradually, all at once like a command had been given. Silence. The kind of silence that's louder than noise. Victor's hand dropped from Emily's arm entirely. She stepped back until she felt the shelving behind her. In the darkness, she could make out his silhouette and the silhouettes of his two men, and none of them were moving. Outside, nobody moved either. Just the headlights, just the shapes of riders beside their bikes. Just that particular stillness that means something has already been decided and everyone in the room is simply waiting to find out what it is. The front door opened. No fanfare, no dramatic kick. It just opened the way a door opens when someone who owns the space behind it decides to walk through. Michael Walker stepped inside. I wasn't wearing anything special. Work boots, jeans, a flannel shirt with the sleeves pushed up, which was how he always wore them, summer or winter. He was 53 years old and he had reading glasses in his shirt pocket, and his hands were the hands of a man who fixed things for a living, scarred and capable, and permanently stained with the particular grease of honest work. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at Victor. He looked at Emily first. Just for a moment. Just enough to take inventory, her arm, her posture, the way she was standing, and she watched something register in his face. Something quiet and deep and very old. Then he looked at the overturned table, then the register. Then he looked at Victor Kane. And Emily had worked alongside this man for 3 years. She'd seen him patient, and she'd seen him annoyed, and she'd seen him sad on the anniversary of something he'd never told her about. She'd seen his full emotional range, and she'd thought she understood it. She had not seen this. What she saw now wasn't anger. Anger was loud and reactive, and it gave you something to predict. This was something underneath anger. Something that had been sitting very still for a very long time and had just been given permission to stand up. Victor tried to find his voice. "Walker," he said, "I know what you were doing," Michael said. His voice was the same as always. Same measured quiet, and yet it landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water, everything rippling outward from it. "I know exactly what you were doing." He walked to the bar, not toward Victor. To the cabinet at the far end. The old oak one with the brass latch that Emily had seen 100 times and never thought about twice. The one Michael had told her once with no particular emphasis, held things he didn't need anymore. She watched him open it, and she saw what it was inside. It wasn't what she expected. It wasn't weapons or documents. It was a jacket. Old leather, the kind that got soft over decades of use, dark brown going black at the creases, and on the back a patch. She'd seen patches like that before, not up close, in passing. On the highway, on men who traveled in formation, on the news occasionally when reporters wanted footage that communicated a certain kind of thing. The Hells Angels patch. Michael held the jacket in both hands. He looked at it for a long moment. Victor had gone very quiet. And Emily understood with the slow dawning certainty of someone who has just realized that the story they thought they were living is actually a much larger story, that she had known Michael Walker for 3 years and had understood essentially nothing about him at all. "I left this life a long time ago," Michael said. He wasn't talking to Victor. He was talking to the jacket, or to himself, or to something only he could see. "I made a decision. I decided to be someone different. Someone my family didn't have to worry about." He set the jacket down on the bar, and looked at Victor Kane with those quiet, absolutely certain eyes. But there are things, Michael said, that don't change, no matter how long you walk away from them. Outside, nobody had moved. 40-some-odd riders standing beside their bikes in the Arizona dark, and not one of them had moved an inch. They were waiting, patiently, the way people wait when they trust completely in the person they were waiting for. Victor took a step back, just one, but Emily saw it, and so did Michael. "You researched me," Michael said. "You found out I ran a bar, that I kept a quiet life, that I didn't have any trouble in my record for 20 years. He picked up the damaged register from where it had been knocked aside and set it back on the counter with both hands carefully like it mattered. Because it did. "What else did you find out?" Victor didn't answer. "Nothing," Michael said, "because there's nothing to find. I made sure of that." He looked at the couple still frozen in their booth. "You two can go. The back door is unlocked." They didn't need to be told twice. When the back door closed behind them, the bar was down to 4 people. Michael, Emily, Victor, and his 2 men, and the 40-some riders outside who were visible through the windows as silhouettes against headlights, patient and still. Victor's 2 men were looking at each other, then at Victor, then back at each other, doing the calculation. "Victor," Michael said, "I'm going to tell you something and I need you to really hear it." Victor said nothing. "I built this place with my hands," Michael said. "Every repair, every upgrade, every pound of coffee, and every clean glass. I built it because I wanted one place in the world where people could come and feel safe. That's all I wanted. Just one place." His voice hadn't risen a single decibel. That was the thing that made it so entirely impossible to ignore. "This girl," he nodded toward Emily without looking away from Victor, "has worked here for 3 years. She's never called in sick without a real reason. She's never taken $1 that wasn't hers. She shows up and she takes care of people, and she does it because she's that kind of person, and you put your hand on her." The last sentence was different from the others, still quiet, but carrying something else inside it, something that had an edge. "I'm going to give you one opportunity," Michael said. "Not because you deserve it, because I made a decision a long time ago about the kind of man I wanted to be, and I intend to keep being that man even right now." He looked at Victor steadily. "Leave. Take your men. Don't come back to this bar. Don't come back to this town. Don't send anyone. Don't make any calls. Just leave and we don't continue this conversation." Victor looked at the window, at the silhouettes, at Michael. "I was doing math." Emily could see it on his face, the specific calculation of someone trying to determine whether the ground he thought was solid had somehow, without his noticing it, become something else entirely. "And if I don't," Victor said. Michael looked at him with those quiet eyes. "Then every person you've threatened in this corridor tells their story," he said. "Every business you've collected from, every family you've frightened, and I promise you, Victor, I know exactly how to make sure the right people hear it." Something shifted in Victor's face. Not capitulation. Not yet. But something. The beginning of a reckoning. Outside, one of the bike's engines turned over. One. Just one. Like a reminder. Emily stood behind the bar and watched Victor Kane, this man, who had walked in 50 minutes ago like he owned the world, work his way through something he hadn't expected to have to work through tonight. She watched him look at his men, and she watched his men look back at him with expressions that told her they had already made their own separate calculations, and they were waiting on him to catch up. Victor straightened. He reached down and picked up his folded paper from the bar. He tucked it back into his jacket pocket. Then he looked at Emily one more time. She looked back at him and didn't move. He walked toward the door. His men followed. The door swung shut behind them. Through the windows, Emily watched Victor stop in the parking lot. She watched him look at the riders. She watched not a single one of them look away. She watched him do the final calculation. The real one, the one that had nothing to do with numbers, and then she watched him walk to his truck. She heard the engine start. She heard it leave. And then there was just the desert and the night and the quiet sound of dozens of motorcycles idling and Michael Walker standing at his bar with his hands flat on the counter, looking at nothing in particular, breathing slowly. "Michael," Emily said. He didn't look at her right away. "Are you all right?" he said. "Me?" She almost laughed. "Are you your arm?" he said. She looked down. There would be a bruise tomorrow. She already knew it. "I'm fine," she said. He nodded. Then he finally looked at her, and she saw something in his face she'd never seen before, not the man who had walked through the door 3 minutes ago, with everything certain behind his eyes, but something older and quieter and more human than that. Something that looked like exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a person who had carried something heavy for a very long time and had just been asked to pick it up again and had done it because there was no other choice. But the weight was not less for the second carrying. "I should have warned you better," he said. "You warned me," she said. "You said some people don't want money. They want control." He looked at her. "I just didn't know you meant people like that," she said. "Or that you knew about people like that the way you did." Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There are things I should probably tell you." "Yeah," Emily said. "I figured." Outside, someone knocked on the window. One of the riders. An older man, gray-bearded, big through the shoulders with patient eyes. Michael raised one hand to him, a gesture that managed to mean both thank you and you can go, and the man nodded once and stepped back. The engines began to start up one by one until the sound rolled through the bar like something tidal, and then they moved out onto the highway, headlights sweeping across the windows, and within 2 minutes the sound had faded back into the desert distance and the night was quiet again. Emily looked at Michael. Michael looked at his hands. Then he looked at the jacket still sitting on the bar. He folded it carefully the way you fold something that meant something, and he put it back in the cabinet and closed the latch. "I made coffee before I came in," he said. "It's in the truck. Go get some if you want. I'll clean this up." "Michael." "Emily." She looked at him. "What are you not telling me?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Victor Kane isn't going to let this sit." The coffee suddenly seemed less important. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means tonight bought us time," Michael said. "Not resolution. There's a difference." He began writing the overturned table, his movements efficient and unhurried. "What happened tonight was one man deciding the math didn't add up. But Victor Kane answers to people too. And those people are going to ask him why he walked away from a bar in a forgotten Arizona town and what exactly he walked away from." Emily sat down on the nearest stool. "And when they ask him that," she said slowly, "and he tells them, they're going to be curious," Michael said, "about who was in that parking lot." The weight of it settled over the room. Emily thought about her daughter asleep at home, about the 6-year-old who had figured out chapter books and was obsessed with horses and needed her mother to come home every night. "So what do we do?" she said. Michael set the table back in its spot and looked at her. "First," he said, "I tell you the truth about who I am." He pulled out a stool and sat down across from her, and for the first time since he'd walked through that door, he looked something other than certain. He looked like a man who had been carrying a story for 20 years and had just arrived at the place where he couldn't carry it alone anymore. And then he said, "We figure out what comes next." Outside, the desert was quiet. The neon sign buzzed back on. The beer coolers hummed. The jukebox came back to life in the middle of track 4, right where it always skipped. And Emily Parker sat across from the man she thought she'd known for 3 years and waited to hear the truth about who he actually was. Michael didn't start with the beginning. He started with a name. "You ever hear of a man called Dagger Hayes?" he said. Emily shook her head. "Good," Michael said. "That means he never made it to your part of the world." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. She hadn't even seen him pour it. He must have done it while she was sitting down. Pure muscle memory, a man who ran a bar for 20 years operating on autopilot even now. Dagger Hayes ran the Southwestern chapter out of Tucson for 11 years. Smartest man I ever met, who used every bit of that intelligence for the worst possible reasons. He paused. "I was his road captain for 6 of those years." Emily didn't say anything. She was learning that silence was the right answer when Michael was finding his way into something. "Road captain means you're responsible for movement," he said. "Where the chapter goes, how it gets there, who knows about it ahead of time and who doesn't. Your logistics, strategy, you're the person who thinks 3 steps ahead." He set his cup down. "I was good at it." "I believe that," Emily said. He looked at her. "That's not a compliment." "I know," she said. "I meant it anyway." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, not quite the opposite. "I wasn't a good man then," he said. "I want to be clear about that before I tell you anything else, because I've watched people romanticize that life, and I don't have any patience for it. We did things I'm not going to describe to you, not because I'm protecting you from it, but because putting words to some of it would make it more real than I want it to be right now. What I'll tell you is that I understood somewhere around year 5 that the road I was on only went one direction, and the destination wasn't somewhere I wanted to end up. Emily thought about the way he'd walked through the door tonight, the certainty of it. What changed, she said. Michael was quiet for a moment that stretched long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said her name was Carol. He didn't say anything else for a few seconds. Just let the name sit there between them the way you set something fragile down and wait to make sure it's not going to tip. She was a school teacher, he said. 2nd grade, she had this laugh. I know that's a cliche. Everybody says the laugh, but with her, it was true. You could be in a completely different room and hear that laugh, and you'd want to go find whatever was funny. He picked up his cup again. She had no business being anywhere near my world, and I had no business being anywhere near hers. And we both knew it, and neither of us cared. What happened, Emily said, and she kept her voice careful, the way you keep your voice when someone's carrying something breakable. We had 3 years, Michael said. Good years. Then I came home one night and found her at the kitchen table, and she'd been crying for a long time before I got there. Long enough that she was past the active part of it, just sitting there dry and very still. He was looking at something that wasn't in the room. She put a photograph on the table. She said she'd found it in my jacket. She didn't ask me to explain it. She just looked at me and said, Michael, I know what this is. The bar was so quiet, Emily could hear the neon sign buzzing outside. And she was right, he said. She knew exactly what it was. And she told me something that I have spent 20 years trying to be worth. He stopped. What did she say? Emily said. She said, I know the man you could be, but I cannot watch you become the man you're going to be if you stay in this life. So you have to choose. And you have to choose right now, because I won't be able to keep loving you through this if you don't. Michael set his cup down very carefully. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. Not my parents, not my friends, nobody. She saw something in me that I didn't know was there, and she was willing to walk away from it if I wouldn't protect it. Emily didn't realize she was holding her breath until she let it out. You chose her, she said. I chose her, he said. Left the chapter. Cut contact. Moved out here with nothing except the cash I'd saved, in the absolute certain knowledge that people do not leave that life without consequences. He looked at the cabinet where the jacket now sat behind the closed latch. That's why the vest is in there, not because I'm proud of it, not because I'm ashamed of it, because it's the truth of what I was, and I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to pretend it didn't exist. It exists. It's part of how I got to this place. I just stopped letting it be the only part. Where is Carol now? Emily said. Michael looked at his hands. She died, he said, 8 years ago. Cancer. Quick? Well, they said it was quick. 7 months from the first diagnosis to the end. He turned his coffee cup. She used to say that Desert Rose was going to be something special. She said people needed a place that felt like a person cared about it. He looked up. She was usually right about things. Emily pressed her hands flat on the bar and breathed. Everything she thought she'd known about this place, the candy jar, the fixed chairs, the midnight check-ins, had just rearranged itself into a different shape. Same pieces, completely different picture. Michael, she said, Victor Kane isn't going to let this go. You said that yourself. No, Michael said, he's not. So what do those people outside know, the ones who came tonight? Who are they? Michael considered the question. Old friends, he said, people I've kept in touch with quietly over the years. People who made different choices than me about staying in that life, but who I still trust, which tells you something about how complicated the whole thing is. He stood up and went around the bar to check the register, which was damaged, but not destroyed. The drawer was bent, but the mechanism still worked. I made one call after I drove past Victor's truck on the highway coming in. That's all it took. One call, Emily said. 20 years of treating people right means something, he said. Even people who live outside the law, maybe especially those people. He pulled the drawer out gently, assessing the damage. They came because I asked. They'll go home tonight, and none of this will be spoken of again. That's how it works. Emily watched him examine the register with the same focused quiet he brought to everything mechanical, and she thought about what she'd seen on his face when he'd looked at her arm, and she said, why didn't you tell me any of this before? He didn't look up. Because the less people know, the less they can be dragged into. But I'm already in it, she said. I was in it tonight whether I knew the backstory or not. He stopped what he was doing. And he looked at her with an expression she'd never seen on him before. Yes, he said, you were. Something tightened in his voice just for a moment before he controlled it back down. And that's on me. I should have had better systems in place. I thought Victor Kane was still 3 towns west. I had a timeline in my head, and it was wrong. You knew he was coming. I knew someone like him was coming, Michael said. I've been watching the pattern for about 6 weeks. Businesses on the corridor going quiet about payments they've been making. Victor's organization moved faster than I expected. Emily stared at him. 6 weeks, she said. Emily, you knew for 6 weeks that something like tonight might happen, and you didn't tell me, and you let me work closing shifts alone. I had someone watching the parking lot every night for the past 3 weeks, he said. Somebody you never would have noticed because he looked like a man eating a sandwich in a pickup truck, which is what he appeared to be. Emily opened her mouth, closed it. A man in a pickup truck eating a sandwich, she said. Randy, Michael said. Retired, very reliable. The night Victor came, Randy called me when they pulled in, which is how I got here before anything worse happened. He looked at her steadily. I know it's not the same as telling you the truth up front. I know that, but I was trying to keep you away from exactly this. By keeping me in the dark. Yes. That's a terrible strategy, she said. I know that too, he said. Now. They looked at each other across the bar for a moment that held all the weight of what had just happened and all the weight of what had just been said. And Emily thought about the 6 months after she'd first started working here, when she'd been trying to figure out if this was a place she could trust, if this man was a person who meant what he seemed to mean, if her instincts, which had failed her badly once before, were functioning correctly. She decided yes. She was still deciding yes. But yes had just gotten considerably more complicated. Tell me what happens next, she said. Not the version where you protect me from things. The actual version. Michael pulled out a stool and sat across from her again. Outside, the last of the headlights had disappeared from the highway. The parking lot was empty. The desert was doing what the desert did at midnight, which was exist in an enormous silence that made everything else seem small. Victor goes back to his people, Michael said. He tells them what happened. There are a few different ways that plays out depending on who's currently running things above him. If it's who I think it is, they're going to be interested in the name. They're going to ask questions. About you. About me. He nodded. And here's the part you need to understand. The reason I left 20 years ago wasn't just about Carol, though Carol was the reason I finally moved. The reason leaving was possible at all was that I helped end something, an operation. I gave information to the right people at the right time, and it resulted in a significant number of arrests and the dismantling of a route that had been running for years. He held her gaze. The people who ran that route were connected to Victor Kane's current organization. The bottom fell out of something in Emily's chest. You were an informant, she said. I was a man who decided to do the one useful thing I could do on the way out of a life I was leaving anyway, Michael said. Those are different things, but from the outside they look the same. And if Victor Kane's people start pulling on that thread, they'll find out, Emily said. They might, he said. They might already know and be in the process of confirming. Or they might know and have decided it was old enough not to matter. I don't know which. But tonight changed the calculus. Tonight reminded them I exist, he said, which was the thing I'd been very carefully preventing for 20 years. Emily stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the empty parking lot. She thought about Lily at home, with the neighbor who watched her on Emily's late shifts, asleep in her bed with her horse books on the nightstand. She thought about the birthday party she'd cleared tonight, and the truck drivers and Dale and his opinions about Kuman. She thought about 3 years of this place being the thing she'd built her stability around. So what do we do? She said. Her voice was steady. She was surprised by that. She wasn't particularly surprised by anything about herself anymore, but she was surprised by that. I've already made 2 more calls, Michael said, while you were at the window. She hadn't even heard his phone. There are people who keep track of Victor's organization, people who have reasons of their own to watch it. I'm going to have more information in the next 24 hours than I have right now. And in the meantime, you go home, he said. You're with Lily. You don't say anything to anyone about tonight, not because I'm asking you to lie, but because the less that's public right now, the better for both of us. And I'm going to stay here and make some calls and let people know that Desert Rose is not alone. The other businesses, Emily said, turning from the window. Victor said every business on the corridor. The mechanic, the grocery store. I know, Michael said. They don't know what happened tonight, she said, and they're going to open tomorrow morning and they're still afraid. I know that too. Michael. Emily, I can only do one thing at a time. No, you can't, she said. You can do about 7 things at a time. I've watched you for 3 years. Don't tell me what you can't do. He looked at her, and then something happened on his face that she'd never seen before. He almost smiled. Get some sleep, he said. Come back tomorrow morning at 9 instead of 11. Bring coffee, not mine. Go to the place on Route 7 Mines, worse than I let on. Emily picked up her jacket from behind the bar. The vest, she said, nodding at the cabinet. What about it? Leave it out, she said. Don't lock it away tonight. I just think... She stopped trying to find the right words for something she was only half certain about. I think tonight it should be visible, just for tonight. Michael looked at her for a moment. Then he walked to the cabinet and opened it. He took out the jacket and laid it flat on the bar. Old leather, the patch worn at the edges. The colors still clear enough. Good night, Michael, Emily said. Good night, he said. She drove home through the desert dark with her hands steady on the wheel and her mind moving at a different speed than her hands sorting through everything she'd just learned and trying to figure out where it fit in the shape of her life and whether the shape of her life was going to have to change and how much and how fast. She didn't have answers. What she had was the specific clarity that sometimes came after surviving something, the sense of being very precisely located in time, very awake, very certain that the next thing she did mattered. She checked on Lily when she got home. The 6-year-old was asleep on her back with both arms out and a chapter book fallen open on the pillow beside her. Emily picked up the book and marked the page and set it on the nightstand next to the 2 plastic horses Lily kept there. Then she stood in the dark bedroom doorway for a moment and just looked. Whatever happened next, she thought this was the reason it had to be handled right. Not fear, not anger. This. She was back at the Desert Rose at 9 the next morning with coffee from Route 7 and the particular kind of tired that came from sleeping 4 hours with your mind, refusing to fully disengage. Michael was already there. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, which probably meant he hadn't. He looked up when she came in. Victor Kane was arrested at 4 this morning, he said. Emily stopped walking. What? DUI checkpoint on the 17, Michael said. Routine stop, except it wasn't. The checkpoint was placed based on a tip about a vehicle description and a time window. He picked up one of the Route 7 cups she was holding and took a long drink. The man I called last night has friends in interesting places. Emily sat down. Is this good? It's complicated, Michael said. An arrest creates a pause. It doesn't end anything. But a pause is what we need right now because in the next 48 hours, some things need to happen that are easier to do when the person who would want to stop them is temporarily unavailable. What things? Michael put his hands flat on the bar. People need to talk, he said. The businesses on the corridor, the ones who've been paying Victor for months, they need to give formal statements before Victor's people can get to them and remind them why they stopped talking the last time. Emily leaned forward. How do we make that happen? We, Michael said. I found that word in the middle of a sentence and I stand by it, Emily said. How do we make it happen? He looked at her for a moment with that expression she was getting better at reading, the one that was calculating and cautious, and underneath it all, something that might have been relief. The relief of someone who had been carrying something alone that for a very long time, being asked finally to let someone else take a handle. There's a woman named Sandra Reyes, he said. She owns the grocery store 2 miles east. She's been paying Victor's people $800 a month for 5 months. She has receipts because she's meticulous and because she was afraid no one would believe her otherwise if it ever came to that. She kept records, Emily said. Sandra Reyes is one of the sharpest people in this valley, Michael said. She kept records. She kept dates. She kept descriptions. She has been waiting for exactly this window for 5 months. But she couldn't take it herself because she lives alone, and she knew that Victor would... He stopped. Emily finished it. Retaliate. Yes. But if she's not the only one, Emily said. If she's not the only one, Michael agreed. It becomes a different kind of case. Numbers change the math. Emily thought for exactly 4 seconds. I know Sandra, she said. She comes in on Sundays, orders the soup, never the salad, because she says the salad portions are stingy. She's right, by the way, the salad portions are stingy. Emily, Let me go talk to her, Emily said. Me, not you, because no offense, but you showing up at a woman's business with a history like yours and a story like last night's, she's going to be cautious. But I'm a woman who works for tips and has a 6-year-old and has been paying her own bills without anyone's help for 3 years. And when I tell her that I stood in that bar last night and didn't back down, she's going to believe me. Michael looked at her. That's not wrong, he said. It's exactly right, Emily said. Who else besides Sandra? There's a mechanic named Tom Briggs about 4 miles west, and an older woman who runs a flower shop near the on-ramp. Her name is Frances Holt, and she's 71 years old, and she has been furious about this since month 1, but couldn't act on it. And there are 3 others I know of, and probably more I don't. Emily pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. Give me the addresses. I need you to understand, Michael said, that if Victor's people find out you're doing this before we're ready. I understand, she said. Do you? She looked at him. I understand better than you think, she said, because I'm not doing this, because I'm brave, or because I don't know what the risk is. I'm doing it because if we don't, Victor Kane gets out on whatever minor charge they're holding him on, and he comes back to this town, and the next time it's not a closed bar with one waitress. It's Sandra Reyes at 6 in the morning when she's opening the grocery store alone, or it's Frances Holt at her flower shop. Or it's someone else's daughter in someone else's parking lot. Her voice stayed level throughout all of it. I don't get to know that and do nothing. Michael was quiet. Then he slid a piece of paper across the bar. Addresses, already written out. She'd thought he was trying to talk her out of it, but he'd been writing down addresses the whole time. Tom Briggs first, he said. He'll be at the shop before 8, which means he's already there. He's the most scared of the 3, but he's also the most angry. And angry is easier to work with than scared. Emily stood up and pocketed the list. I'll be back before noon, she said. Be careful. Always. She was almost to the door when he said, Emily. She stopped. What you said last night to Victor, he said. Before I got there, the way you stood. I heard about it from the couple in the booth before they left last night. I ran into them in the parking lot. He paused. That took something. You'd have done the same, she said. I know, he said. That's why I said something. She went out into the morning. The Route 7 coffee was in her hand, and the list of addresses was in her pocket, and the desert was doing its morning thing. The light coming in flat and gold from the east, and somewhere out on the highway, a truck was moving through the corridor that Victor Kane thought he owned. Not for much longer. Tom Briggs was exactly what Michael had said, scared and furious in equal measure, the combination showing on his face as a kind of locked-jaw stillness. When Emily walked into his shop and said Michael Walker sent her. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he wiped his hands on a rag. Then he said, how many others working on that, Emily said, but at least 5 that we know of. Sandra, he said, she's next on my list. He nodded slowly. Then he said, I have 9 months of payments. I photographed everyone with my phone because I didn't know what else to do with the feeling. I needed to do something with it, even if it didn't go anywhere. It's going somewhere now, Emily said. Tom looked at her. Victor's going to find out. Victor's in a holding cell on the 17, Emily said. We have a window. It's not a big one. He untied his shop apron and hung it on the wall hook with the particular deliberateness of a man making a decision. Let's go talk to Sandra, he said. Sandra Reyes cried when they told her. Not with fear, the release of something that had been held at pressure for too long. She sat at the desk in the back of her grocery store with her records spread out in front of her, meticulous, dated, organized, everything Michael had said and more. And she cried in the way that people cry when they've been waiting a very long time to be believed, and someone finally shows up. I thought no one would come, she said. Someone came, Emily said. Frances Holt. When they reached her flower shop 40 minutes later, was a different situation entirely. Frances Holt had apparently been ready for this conversation for quite some time and had her own documentation, her own timeline, and a very specific description of the 2 men who had collected from her because she'd taken their photographs on her phone when they were leaving. I told them I was taking photos of the hydrangeas, Frances said. Men like that never think a 71-year-old woman with a camera phone is a threat. How much did they take from you, Emily said. 4 months at $600 a month, Frances said. And I want every dollar back. By 11:30, Emily had 3 confirmed statements, photographs and documentation from Tom, Sandra, and Francis, and 2 more names, a laundry owner and a small motel on the eastern edge of the corridor that Sandra had added because she knew more about what was happening to her neighbors than anyone had thought to ask. She drove back to the Desert Rose and spread everything on the bar in front of Michael. He looked at it. He was quiet for a long moment. "This," he said, "is more than I expected." "People were ready," Emily said. "They just needed someone to show up first." Michael looked up at her. "There's someone I need you to meet, tonight. Someone I should have gotten involved weeks ago and didn't, because I was still trying to handle this quietly." He was already reaching for his phone. "Her name is Detective Rosa Martinez. She works out of the county office. She's been building a case on Victor's organization for 8 months, and she has been waiting for exactly what you just put on this bar." Emily looked at the spread of documents and photographs and receipts. "This is the thing that breaks it open," Michael said. "Not tonight with the motorcycles. That was just the door. This," he gestured at the evidence on the bar, "this is what actually ends it." Emily sat down. Her coffee had gone cold. She drank it anyway. Because for the first time since 11:52, the previous night she felt something shift in the air. Not the tension of a threat approaching, but something different. Something that felt like the particular weight of a problem that has been identified and named and given a shape, which meant for the first time it could actually be handled. Outside, the highway ran through the desert in both directions, the same as it always had, but it didn't belong to Victor Kane anymore. And everyone who'd been afraid to say so was about to say so. Detective Rosa Martinez arrived at Desert Rose Bar at 2:17 in the afternoon, driving an unmarked sedan, the color of old asphalt, and she walked in the same way she probably walked into every room quickly, quietly, eyes already working before the door finished closing behind her. She was maybe 40, compact and direct, with short dark hair and the particular economy of movement that belonged to people who had learned a long time ago not to waste anything. She looked at the damaged register. She looked at the overturned, then righted table. She looked at Emily's arm where the bruise had come in fully now, purple-green at the edges. Then she looked at Michael. "You waited too long to call me," she said. "I know," Michael said. "You wanted to handle it yourself." "I know that too." Rosa pulled out a stool and sat down and looked at the documents Emily had spread across the bar. She didn't touch them yet. She read them from a distance the way experienced people read things, getting the shape before the detail. "Sandra Rhea," she said. "I've been trying to get to Sandra for 3 months. She wouldn't return my calls." "She didn't know if she could trust you," Emily said. Rosa looked at her. "And she trusts you." "She trusts that I'm not going to disappear when things get complicated," Emily said. "She's learned to tell the difference." Something shifted in Rosa's expression, not offense, something closer to respect arriving faster than she'd probably intended to show it. "How many statements do you have documented?" Rosa said. 5 confirmed, Emily said. 2 more pending. Sandra gave me names for 4 additional businesses she believes were targeted, but hasn't spoken to directly. Rosa looked at Michael. "She always like this?" "Pretty much," Michael said. Rosa picked up Sandra's documentation and started reading it properly now, and the bar was quiet except for the sound of paper and the distant hum of the highway. Emily watched her read and tried to gauge what she was thinking, but Rosa Martinez was very good at not broadcasting her thinking, which was probably a professional requirement. "This is enough to build on," Rosa said finally. "It's not enough to close on, not yet." She set the papers down. "Victor Kane made bail 2 hours ago." Emily felt the words land in her chest. 2 hours, she said. "That's fast," Rosa said. "Yes, which means he has resources we didn't fully account for, which means he's going to be moving quickly to contain whatever he thinks happened last night." She looked at Michael. "He's going to come back here." "I know," Michael said. "Not tonight, not personally. He's too smart for that right now, and he knows he's being watched. But he's going to send someone to deliver a message." "What kind of message?" Emily said. Rosa looked at her with that direct, unvarnished way, the kind that reminds people why they stopped talking. The silence that followed was the kind that required everyone in the room to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment before moving past it. Emily moved past it first. "Then we need to move faster than he does." "Agreed," Rosa said. "Here's what I need." She pulled out a legal pad. "I need formal recorded statements from everyone on your list. Not notes on a phone, not photographs of receipts on the record with a case number protected by the process. That's what creates consequences. That's what makes it so Victor Kane can't just walk around the corner and make the problem disappear. How long does that take? Michael said. If we start today, tomorrow for the first wave. 48 hours for a complete picture. Rosa tapped the legal pad. But only if we're moving constantly. No gaps. Emily looked at Michael. Michael looked at Emily. Sandra will do it today, Emily said. Tom too. Francis Holt was ready to give a statement before I even finished explaining why I was there. Frances Holt with the flower shop, Rosa said. You know her. She's called my office 6 times in the past 4 months, Rosa said. I could never get her to come in. A pause. She called 6 times. She's been ready, Emily said. She just needed to know she wasn't going first alone. Rosa was already writing. Set it up. My office, or I can come to them if mobility is an issue. Whatever it takes to get them in front of a camera before end of business tomorrow. She looked up. I also need your statement. Both of yours. You're the primary incident witnesses from last night. Whatever you need, Michael said. Rosa looked at him for a moment, the look of someone choosing their words carefully. Michael, she said, I've known about you for a while, not as a target, as context. Your name appeared in some background material 3 years ago when I first started building the Kane file. She paused. You walked away clean. I want you to know I know that. Michael held her gaze. What are you saying? I'm saying that your history doesn't complicate this case unless you let it, Rosa said. The question some people are going to ask about whether a man with your background can be a credible witness, that question is going to get asked. I need to know you're ready for it. The bar was very quiet. Emily watched Michael absorb this. She watched him do what she'd come to recognize as his particular version of processing the stillness that looked like nothing was happening, but was actually everything happening just internally, just very fast and very thoroughly. I've been ready for that question for 20 years, he said. I just never expected to have to answer it. You will now, Rosa said, not unkindly. I know. He folded his hands on the bar. I'll answer it. Rosa nodded once, gathered her legal pad and stood. I'll be back at 4. Have Emily's list ready and I'll start making calls. She looked around the bar one more time. Get this register fixed. Open tonight if you can. The worst thing you can do right now is look like you've been closed down. Then she was gone. The door swung shut and the bar was just Emily and Michael and the cold remnants of Route 7 coffee in a spread of documents that represented 5 people's fear, finally being given somewhere to go. She's good, Emily said. Yes, Michael said. You should have called her weeks ago. I know. You keep saying I know, because I keep being right, and he said. And there it was again, not quite a smile, but the closest thing to one she'd seen from him since before last night. She took it. The next 4 hours moved at a different speed than anything that had happened so far. Emily made calls. She drove to Sandra's grocery store and sat with her while Rosa's colleague took the formal statement, watching Sandra's hands stop shaking about halfway through as the process gave structure to everything she'd been carrying. She drove to Frances Holt's flower shop and watched a 71-year-old woman in reading glasses narrate 9 months of extortion with the calm precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her head so many times that the actual doing of it was almost anticlimactic. I kept every text they sent, Frances said. They texted because they thought they were too smart to put things in writing, but not smart enough to understand that a text message is writing. The investigator, taking her statement, looked up at that with something very close to delight. Tom Briggs gave his statement at his shop, still in his work clothes because he hadn't wanted to stop working while he waited, said the work kept him from thinking too much, and if he thought too much, he'd talk himself out of it again. He talked himself in instead. Emily was back at the Desert Rose by 6. Michael was behind the bar. The neon sign was on. 3 regulars were at their usual stools, and the particular normalcy of that was so striking after the past 18 hours that Emily stood in the doorway for a second and just registered it. Dale was at the end of the bar with his coffee. The jukebox was on track, 3-1 track before the skip. How'd it go, Michael said. 3 statements on record, Emily said. 2 more scheduled for tomorrow morning. The laundry owner on the East End agreed to come in. Sandra knew him, vouched for us. She dropped onto a stool. Victor Kane's people came by the mechanic shop while I was there. Michael went still. What? They drove past twice, Emily said. Slow. Tom saw them. He knew the truck. She kept her voice even. He gave his statement anyway. The bar was quiet for a moment. Tom Briggs is braver than he knows, Michael said. He knows, Emily said. He's just scared anyway, which is harder. The regulars at the end of the bar were doing the thing regulars did, which was pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. And Emily understood that this was going to ripple out through the usual channels of small-town knowledge, whether she wanted it to or not. By tomorrow morning, everyone who came in for coffee would have some version of the story. The versions would be wrong in the details and right in the shape. The door opened. A man walked in who Emily didn't recognize. I was 30-ish with a forgettable face and clothes chosen specifically to be forgettable, and he sat at the far end of the bar and ordered a beer, and did not look at Emily or Michael with any particular interest. He was the most interesting person who'd walked in all week. Michael poured the beer without inflection and set it down without a word, and Emily watched Michael's hands, which were completely steady, and she understood that he had recognized something about this man the moment he walked in the same way she had, and that he was going to let it play out, because making a scene would tell the man more than letting him sit there and drink a beer. The man sat for 20 minutes. He drank half the beer. He left a 10 on the bar. I didn't say anything to either of them. He didn't need to. The message was the presence. The message was, we know where you are. The message was, Victor Kane is out of holding, and he knows what you did this morning, and he wants you to know that he knows. When the door closed behind him, Dale said from the end of the bar without turning around, "Friend of yours?" "No," Michael said. "Figured," Dale said and drank his coffee. Emily waited until the remaining regulars were deep in their own conversations. Then she leaned toward Michael and said quietly, "Rosa needs to know." "Already texted her," he said, while I was pouring his beer. She looked at him. "Left hand," he said. Phone was below the bar. She shook her head once. "You're something else." "I've had practice." Rosa called back at 8:45. Emily was in the back office doing closing paperwork. Michael had asked her to stay later than usual, which she'd taken not as an order, but as a request that she understood the reasoning behind. She answered on the first ring. "The vehicle that drove past Tom Briggs's shop this afternoon," Rosa said. "We ran the plate. It's registered to a shell company that connects back to Kane's organization. They're not even trying to hide it." A pause. "Which means one of two things. Either they're sloppy, or they want us to know they're watching, and they don't care if we know they're watching." "Which one do you think it is?" Emily said. "I think Victor Kane spent 3 days thinking his operation on this corridor was invisible," Rosa said. "And now he knows it isn't, and he's angry, and angry people get reckless. Is reckless good or bad for us?" "Reckless is good for the case," Rosa said. "Reckless is potentially bad for you and Michael in the short term." Emily absorbed this. "How short?" "The next 72 hours are the window," Rosa said. "After that, we'll have enough on record that any move against either of you becomes counterproductive for Kane. He knows that as well as I do. So whatever he's going to do, it happens in the next 3 days. And during those 3 days, I'm putting a car on your street tonight," Rosa said. "Michael's too, uniformed, visible. I want Kane to know we're there because I want him to do the math and decide it's not worth it." Emily looked at the wall of the office, which had a corkboard on it with Michael's supplier contacts and a photograph of the bar from 10 years ago, same place, younger. Everything Michael behind the counter with dark hair and a wider smile. "Rosa," Emily said, "there's something I need to tell you." "Tell me." "The businesses on Victor's list," Emily said. "I don't think we know all of them. Sandra gave us 4 names and we've confirmed 2 of those, but I've been thinking about the corridor and the geography and the spacing, and Victor's operation was too organized to leave gaps. There are businesses between the ones we've identified that probably paid and haven't come forward because nobody's asked them directly yet." Silence on the line. "Go on," Rosa said. "There's a diner about 7 miles east called the Sunrise," Emily said. "It's been under different management for about 4 months. The original owner retired fast, and the new management is very quiet. And there's a bait shop near the river access that changed its hours about 5 months ago, started closing 2 hours earlier than before, and a hair salon on the North Service Road that stopped doing walk-ins." Another silence. You noticed all of that, Rosa said. I drive that corridor every day, Emily said. I notice when things change. Emily, Rosa's voice shifted into something that was less investigator and more human for a moment. You should have been doing this job. I'm doing this job, Emily said, right now, unofficially. I know, I mean professionally. A pause. We'll talk about that later. Right now, the diner, the bait shop, the salon. I need names and addresses. Emily looked at the corkboard. I'll have them to you in 30 minutes. She went back out to the bar and found Michael closing up the last regular, gone the lights turned down to the level he kept them at when it was just cleanup. She told him what she'd told Rosa. He listened without interrupting. Then he went behind the bar and pulled out an old ledger book, the kind with the marbled cover that nobody used anymore, except people who'd learned their systems before everything went digital. He opened it to a page near the back. Sunrise Diner, he said. Owner's name is Perry, Gary Perry. He came to see me 2 months ago. He didn't say why directly. He talked around it for about 40 minutes. But I understood what he was trying to ask. He wanted to know if I knew anyone who could help. Michael ran his finger down the page. I didn't know yet what I was going to do about any of it, so I gave him a number to call if things got worse and told him to keep his head down. Emily stared at him. You have a list. I have notes, he said. Michael. She put both hands on the bar. How long have you known about all of this? He looked at her. 3 months, he said. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Emily pressed her lips together. She counted to 4. She was angry, and she was also simultaneously aware that the anger was going to have to wait because there were more important things happening right now. And she was the kind of person who could hold 2 things at once when she had to. Give me the list, she said. He turned the ledger around and slid it across to her. She photographed every page with her phone and sent it to Rosa without another word. Rosa called back in 6 minutes. This changes things, Rosa said. This isn't a corridor operation. This is half the county. Her voice was doing something Emily hadn't heard from her before, a controlled, focused intensity. The voice of someone who has just seen the full shape of the thing they've been looking at, piece by piece. Michael's been tracking this for 3 months and sat on it. I know, Emily said. She looked at Michael, who was looking at the bar. He thought he was protecting people. How was protecting himself from having to get involved, Rosa said. Not cruelly, just accurate. Emily didn't argue it. Rosa, she said, what does this mean for the timeline? It means I need to move my timeline up significantly, Rosa said. If this is countywide, Victor Kane has connections higher up than I initially built into my case, which means I need everything locked and documented before he can make calls. A pause. Can you get Michael into my office first thing tomorrow, 7 a.m.? I need his full account on record. He'll be there, Emily said. She hung up and looked at Michael. 7 a.m., she said. Rosa's office. I heard, he said. You're going to tell her everything, Emily said. The 3 months, the ledger, the names you recognized when Victor first started showing up. All of it. Emily. All of it, Michael. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I know why you held it back. I understand why, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend I don't know the specific kind of fear that makes a person hold very still and hope a problem moves past them without stopping. She held his gaze. But I have a 6-year-old at home, and there's a patrol car going on my street tonight, and Victor Kane made bail 2 hours earlier than anyone expected. So the time for holding things back is over. He looked at her for a long moment. All right, he said. Good. She was gathering her things when he said, Emily, there's one more thing. She stopped. The thing about Michael Walker was that he always did this. He always had one more thing, and the one more thing was always the thing that changed the shape of everything else. She turned around slowly. He reached under the bar and set a photograph on the counter. Old, printed on actual photo paper, the kind that meant it was at least 15 years old. 3 men standing outside a building. The man on the left she didn't recognize. The man in the middle was clearly a younger Michael, maybe 35, broader, through the shoulders, the leather vest visible. The man on the right was Victor Kane. Emily looked at the photograph for a long moment. You knew him, she said. Before. We weren't close, Michael said. He was a prospect when I was road captain. He washed out, didn't have the right temperament, too erratic, too interested in the wrong kind of business. Michael picked up the photograph and looked at it. He blamed the chapter for ending his shot at that life. He blamed me specifically because I was the one who recommended against keeping him. Emily sat back down on the stool. Everything rearranged itself again. So last night wasn't random, she said. I don't know for certain, Michael said. It might have been coincidence, Victor working a territory that happened to include my bar. Or it might have been something he worked toward, deliberately knowing I was here. He set the photograph down. I didn't know it was him until he walked through the door last night. I knew the name, but not that it was the same Victor. And when I recognized him, I understood why he was so confident, Michael said. He wasn't just running a protection operation. He came to this specific bar in this specific town because he wanted to take something from me. A pause. He wanted to show me that the man who ended his shot at that life 25 years ago couldn't protect his own place. The silence in the bar was absolute. Emily thought about Victor's face last night when Michael walked in, the particular quality of the moment, the way the energy changed. She'd read it as a powerful man recognizing a more powerful one. But now she heard it differently. Now she heard the 25-year-old grudge underneath it, the thing that had made this personal long before it was professional. Rosa needs to know this too, Emily said. Yes. Tonight. Not tomorrow morning, tonight. She pulled out her phone. Rosa picked up on the second ring, and Emily put her on speaker, and Michael told her about the photograph and the history and what it meant for the shape of what they'd thought was a business operation. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. You understand what this means, Rosa said. It means his motive is personal, Michael said, which means he's less rational about this than we thought. It means he won't cut his losses the way a purely business-minded person would, Rosa said. Even if we build a case that makes it economically stupid to come after you, he might do it anyway because this isn't about economics for him. Another pause. It also means he was specifically targeting you, which is something I can use. It changes the legal picture significantly. How, Emily said. It turns a protection racket into a targeted harassment and intimidation campaign with a 25-year documented origin, Rosa said. That's a different set of charges. That's a different kind of sentence. The sound of her writing. Michael, bring the photograph tomorrow, and anything else you have that documents your history with Kane. Letters, records, anything. I'll find whatever I have, Michael said. Rosa hung up. Emily and Michael sat in the quiet bar, the neon sign buzzing outside the coolers, humming the jukebox, mercifully silent for once. Are you scared? Emily said. Michael thought about it for a moment before answering, which was how she knew the answer was going to be honest. I'm cautious, he said. There's a difference. What's the difference? Scared makes you freeze, he said. Cautious makes you precise. He looked at the bar, the old wood of it, the shelves he'd built himself, the coffee setup Carol had picked out from a catalog, with the deliberateness of someone furnishing a place they intended to stay. I've been scared before. This isn't that. What does scared feel like for you? Emily said. He looked at her. The night I left the chapter, he said. That was scared. Walking away from everything I knew, not being sure who was going to follow me, not being sure what waited on the other side, not knowing if Carol was going to be on the other side at all. He turned his cup. What I feel right now is clear. I know what's happening. I know what needs to be done. I know the risks. He looked at her. Clear isn't the same as comfortable, but it's better than scared. Emily thought about that. Lily asked me this morning where I went last night, she said. I left before she was up, and she figured out I'd come home late. She paused. I told her I had to help a friend with something. She asked if the friend was okay. I said yes. She looked at her hands, which was true, but the whole truth is a little more complicated. How much does she know about your work? Everything 6-year-olds know about waitress work, Emily said, which is mom brings food to people and people give her money and then we have money. A small pause. She's very concrete. Good skill to have, Michael said. She asks if you're nice, Emily said. I've mentioned you. She always asks if the people I work with are nice. Michael was quiet. What do you tell her? I tell her you're one of the best people I know, Emily said, which was true before last night and is considerably more true now. Michael looked at the bar. I want to meet her sometime, he said, when all of this is over. She'll interrogate you about horses, Emily said. She has no interest in motorcycles. I should warn you, it's all horses. I know a thing or two about horses, he said. Emily picked up her jacket. Of course you do. She drove home with the patrol car visible in her rearview mirror, keeping a steady distance behind her all the way to her street, and she sat in the driveway for a minute when she got there, just sitting. The house was dark except for Lily's nightlight, the soft orange glow of it through the curtain. She thought about what Rosa had said, the 72-hour window. 3 days in which Victor Kane, operating from personal anger and professional desperation, might decide that the math had stopped mattering to him. 3 days in which everything they'd built in the last 24 hours either held together or didn't. She thought about Sandra crying at her grocery store desk, about Tom Briggs untying his apron, about Francis Holt's photographs of hydrangeas, about a 30-year-old photograph of 3 men outside a building, and 25 years of a grudge pointed like a compass at one quiet bar in an Arizona town. She thought about Michael's hands flat on the bar, completely steady. She got out of the car, went inside and checked on Lily, still on her back, arms out. One of the plastic horses had migrated onto the pillow. Emily set it back on the nightstand. Then she sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and her phone, and she opened her notes app and started writing down everything she remembered about the corridor, every business, every change she'd observed, every detail that might matter, because Rosa had been right about one thing: the next 72 hours were the window. And Emily Parker did not intend to waste a minute of it. Emily was at Rosa's office at 6:50 a.m., 10 minutes before Michael. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours. She knew because she'd watched the clock at 2, then at 3:40, then given up entirely at 5 and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table finishing the notes she'd started the night before. By the time she drove to the county building, she had 4 pages of corridor observations on her phone: businesses, timing changes, behavioral shifts. She'd filed away without knowing why, and now understood completely. Michael arrived at 6:58. He looked like he'd slept even less than her, which was saying something, but he was shaved, and his shirt was clean, and he had the photograph in a manila envelope under his arm, and a separate folder of documents she hadn't seen before. "What's in the folder?" she said. "Records," he said, "from when I left the chapter. Correspondence. Some of it I shouldn't technically have, but I kept it because I thought someday it would matter." "Someday is today," Emily said. Rosa was already inside, which meant Rosa had probably been inside since before either of them arrived, because Rosa Martinez seemed like a person who existed at the office, the way furniture existed, just always already there when you arrived. She had 2 other investigators with her, both younger, both with the focused quiet of people who understood they were in the room to work and not to speak unless spoken to. "Sit down," Rosa said, not rudely, just efficiently. "We have a lot to get through, and I want to be done before 9, because at 9 I have a call with the DA's office, and I want to walk into that call with everything we're doing right now already on the record." They sat. For the next 90 minutes, Michael talked. Emily had heard most of it already: the chapter, the years, the leaving. But hearing him tell it, formally on the record to a camera in the corner of the room and 2 investigators taking parallel notes, that was different. It had a different weight. She watched his face as he went through it, and she watched him do the thing he'd done at the bar, the internal processing running underneath the steady surface. And she thought about what he'd said the night before about the difference between scared and cautious. He was being very precise right now. Every word chosen, every date confirmed before he stated it. Every claim he made, he followed with the documentation to support it. When he got to the photograph, Rosa held it under the light for a long moment. "How certain are you that this is Kane?" she said. "Completely," Michael said. "He was 22, 23 when this was taken. He goes by the same name. He has the same particular way of standing." He pointed to something in the image Emily couldn't quite make out. "And that scar on his right hand, he had it then. He still has it. I saw it last night when he put his hand on the bar." Rosa looked at one of the investigators. The investigator nodded and made a note. "The dismissal from the chapter," Rosa said. "You said you recommended against keeping him. Was that documented internally?" "It would have been," Michael said. "Whether those records still exist, I can't say. But there were at least 4 other people present when the decision was made. 2 of them I'm still in contact with." Rosa looked up. "They'd confirm it." "If I asked them to," Michael said. "Ask them today," Rosa said. "This afternoon. I need written confirmation from at least one of them that Kane's removal was directly connected to you." "Why does that matter?" Emily said. Rosa looked at her. "Because it establishes premeditation. If we can show that Kane specifically targeted Michael's business out of a 25-year grievance, the protection racket becomes secondary." The primary charge becomes a sustained, targeted campaign: intimidation, harassment, property damage, physical assault. She looked at Emily's arm. That's your arm. That's physical assault. And if it was premeditated and targeted, the sentencing picture changes dramatically. Emily looked at her arm. The bruise had gone deeper overnight, green-purple at the center now. She thought about Victor's hand, the certainty of his grip. And she thought about what Rosa had just said, that the mark on her arm wasn't just a bruise. It was a piece of a case that went back 25 years, and something in her chest went tight, and then released the way things released when they finally got named properly. "What do you need from me?" Emily said. "Your complete account of last night," Rosa said. "Every word you can remember. The sequence. What he said, what you said, what he did physically. We'll go through it in detail." She looked at the investigator. "Can you take Michael to the secondary room? I want to run Emily's account separately so we have independent documentation." Michael stood. He looked at Emily before he went. She gave him a small nod. He went. Rosa poured 2 cups of coffee from the machine on the credenza, set one in front of Emily, and sat down across from her. The camera in the corner was recording. The investigator who'd stayed behind had her notepad open. "Start at 11:50, Rosa said. "When they came through the door." Emily started talking. She found, as she went through it, that she remembered more than she'd realized. The specific words, the sequence of Victor's movements, the moment he stood up from the stool, the angle of his grip on her arm, the exact thing she'd said, and the exact inflection she'd used when she said it, because she'd known, even as she was saying it, that it was either going to be the right call or a catastrophic mistake, and she'd made it anyway. Rosa listened without interrupting. The investigator wrote without stopping. When Emily finished, Rosa was quiet for a moment. "You've given testimony before," Rosa said. It wasn't a question. Emily looked at her. "No, you're very precise." "I'm a person who pays attention," Emily said. "I work a bar. You learn to track a lot of things simultaneously or you don't last." Rosa nodded slowly. "When you said you picked the wrong place, what did you mean by that?" Emily thought about it. "I meant Michael was coming," she said, "but I also meant something beyond that. I meant this bar isn't what he thinks it is. I meant the people in it aren't who he's decided we are." She paused. "I meant he'd made an error in judgment about the situation, and I knew it, and I wanted him to understand that I knew it, even if I couldn't prove it yet." Rosa looked at her for a moment. "I'm going to make a call to a colleague of mine after we're done here," Rosa said. "She works in the County Victim Witness Coordination Office. I want you to talk to her about a program they run, not now when this is over, but I want you to know the option exists." "What kind of program?" Emily said. "She helps people who've shown particular aptitude under pressure situations find pathways into investigative roles," Rosa said. "Officially and professionally, with training and support." A pause. "It's not a sales pitch. You don't have to do anything with it. I just want you to know it's a conversation that's available." Emily absorbed this. "Can we get through the next 72 hours first?" she said. "Yes," Rosa said. "We can." They were done by 8:40. Michael was waiting in the hallway when Emily came out, and they walked to the parking lot together in the morning light. "How'd it go?" he said. "Good, I think," she said. "You go down." "She asked good questions," he said. "I didn't know a question could be that precise and still be a question." Emily almost laughed. "That's Rosa." They stood beside their respective vehicles for a moment. The county building hummed around them, the machinery of an institution doing what institutions did slowly and thoroughly and with a paperwork trail. "Gary Perry," Emily said. "The Sunrise Diner. Did you call him?" "Last night at 11, Michael said. "He's coming in at 10 this morning. He's bringing his manager, who apparently also has documentation." "Good." She thought for a moment. "The bait shop I mentioned to Rosa, I don't actually know the owner. I just know the hours changed." "His name is Earl Daxton," Michael said. "He's 64, widowed, and he's been running that shop for 30 years. He called me about 6 weeks ago. Didn't say why directly. Said he was thinking about closing early permanently." Michael looked at the building. "I told him not to decide anything yet. Told him things might change." "You knew then," Emily said. "I hope then," Michael said. "Different thing." "Call Earl," she said, "today. He's already on my list." She nodded. Then she said, "Michael, last night you said you should have had better systems in place, that you thought Victor was still 3 towns west." Yes. How did you know where he was at all? Michael was quiet for a moment. Randy, he said, the man in the pickup truck. The sandwich guy. Randy has a particular set of skills from a previous life that includes keeping track of people's movements without being noticed. Michael said, he's been doing volunteer work in that area for me for about 4 months. Emily looked at him. Volunteer work, she said. He owes me a significant favor from 11 years ago, Michael said. He's been very committed to repaying it. What did you do for him 11 years ago? Michael looked at the sky. I helped his daughter get out of a situation she couldn't get out of on her own. A pause. A bad situation, the kind that doesn't resolve itself. Emily nodded slowly. You do that a lot, she said, don't you? Do what? Help people out of situations that don't resolve themselves. Michael looked at her. I have a skill set that isn't useful for many things, but is very useful for that one thing, he said. Seemed like a waste not to use it. She thought about the candy jar behind the register, the fixed chairs, the midnight check-ins, the man Randy sitting in a pickup truck with a sandwich watching a parking lot so that Emily could close the bar without knowing she was being protected. The call it took to bring 40 riders to a desert highway in 20 minutes. 20 years of choosing peace. 20 years of choosing it actively, not passively. Not by stepping back from the world, but by stepping into it in a specific way toward the specific people who needed the specific thing he was able to provide. You built a whole system, she said. I built a life, he said. The system came with it. She got in her car. He got in his. She pulled out first, and he followed, and they split off at the main road, him toward the bar, her toward Route 7 for coffee, because she was not going to make it through the rest of this day on the 3 hours of sleep in the county building's machine coffee. She was pulling into the Route 7 lot when her phone rang. Rosa. She answered it. We have a problem, Rosa said. Emily gripped the phone. What happened? Earl Daxton, Rosa said. The bait shop. Emily's stomach dropped. Is he? He's fine, Rosa said quickly. He's fine, but his shop isn't. Sometime between 11 last night and 6 this morning, someone put a rock through his front window. A pause. He found it when he opened. The rock had a note attached. What did the note say? It said, stay quiet. Emily sat in the parking lot of Route 7 with the engine running and the morning coming in through the windshield and the weight of those 2 words sitting in her ear. Stay quiet. He called you, Emily said. He called Michael, Rosa said. Michael called me. I have people at the shop right now. A pause. Emily, this is Victor doing exactly what I said he'd do. He's moving through his list, and he's moving fast. Which means we need to move faster. What do you need? I need Earl Daxton's statement today, Rosa said. He's shaken, but Michael says he's angry. That's good. I need you to go to him, not me, not my investigators. I need you. Because right now, Earl Daxton is a man standing in front of a broken window who doesn't trust official process to actually protect him. I can be there in 20 minutes, Emily said. Go, Rosa said. Emily went. She didn't stop for the coffee. Earl Daxton was exactly what she'd expected and nothing like she'd imagined. A big man wide through the chest, the kind of build that said he'd done physical work his whole life and it had agreed with him. Silver-haired with hands that looked like they'd been used hard and often, and eyes that were red at the edges from something he was working very hard to push back down. Howe was standing outside his shop with his arms crossed, looking at the boarded-up window that Michael's contact, she didn't ask how, she just noted that it was already boarded, had covered while she was driving over. Earl, she said, getting out of her car. He looked at her. You're the girl from the bar. Emily Parker, she said. Michael sent me. I know who you are, he said. My wife used to come to your bar on Friday nights. Before she passed, she liked the soup. Emily stopped. Mrs. Daxton, she said slowly. Taller than me, silver hair, always ordered extra crackers. That's her, Earl said. His voice had something complicated in it. I remember her, Emily said, and she did. A woman who came in every Friday for 2 years and ordered the soup and the extra crackers, and always left a tip that was exactly $1 more than the standard percentage because she'd done the math and decided that was fair. She was kind. Earl looked at his boarded window. She worked 60 hours a week for 30 years to help me keep this place, he said. I'm not going to let someone throw a rock through it and walk away like it was nothing. No, Emily said, you're not. I already decided, he said, before you even pulled up. I just needed He stopped. I needed someone to show up. Not to talk me into it, just to show up. I'm here, she said. He gave his statement at noon at Rosa's office, sitting very straight in his chair, describing 30 years of building something from nothing and 5 months of watching someone try to dismantle it, one payment at a time, and the rock through his window that morning, and the note. His voice only broke once. He controlled it back immediately and didn't apologize for it, which was the right instinct, and he seemed to know it. When it was done, Rosa walked him to his car herself, which Emily noticed and understood as a deliberate signal. Rosa Martinez was precise and efficient and not given to unnecessary gestures. Walking a witness to his car was a gesture. It meant, I see you. It meant this mattered. She came back inside and found Emily waiting. 7 statements on record, Rosa said. The bait shop window incident documented. The vehicle surveillance of Tom Briggs documented. She sat down. I just got off the phone with the DA. We're moving to formal charges today. Emily blinked. Today? Today, Rosa said. The rock through the window was the accelerant. It's blatant witness tampering occurring while Kane is out on bail 24 hours after the initial incident. The DA's office has been sitting on an incomplete file for 8 months today. We gave them enough to move. She looked at Emily steadily. Victor Kane is going to be arrested again within the next 4 hours. This time, the bail conversation is going to be significantly different. Emily sat down. The specific exhaustion of the past 36 hours hit her all at once. Not physically, or not only physically, but the exhaustion of sustained high alert, the cost of operating at full capacity for an extended period when your body and brain had been planning on regular life. Is it over, she said. The immediate threat is significantly reduced, Rosa said. The legal process is just beginning. She picked up her pen. Those are different things. I know, Emily said, but your 72-hour window just got a lot more comfortable. Emily looked at her hands. The notes she'd written through the night, the drives she'd made, Sandra's tears, Tom's apron, Francis's hydrangea photographs, Earl's red-rimmed eyes, all of it running together now into something that had a shape, something that had a before and an after. She called Michael. He picked up on the first ring. Rosa's moving to charges today, she said. They're arresting Victor within 4 hours. Silence on the line. Then Michael said, Earl, okay, not they got him, not it worked, not anything about himself. Earl, okay. Earl's good, Emily said. He was ready. Good, Michael said. Michael. Yeah. Is the bar open and lunch rush? He said. Dale's here. He says the chili needs more cumin. Emily laughed. It came out sudden and real and slightly too loud for the county building hallway, and she didn't care at all. It does need more cumin, she said. Tell him I said so. He'll be insufferable, Michael said. He's already insufferable, she said. At least this time he'll be right. She hung up and sat with the phone in her hand for a moment, and Rosa appeared in the hallway doorway with her jacket on. I have to go meet the DA, Rosa said. You should go home. Be with your daughter. You've done enough for today. Lily's in school until 3, Emily said. Then go get a meal that isn't coffee, Rosa said. You haven't eaten since yesterday. Emily started to argue. Rosa gave her a look that communicated that this particular argument was not worth either of their time. Emily went and got food. She ate at a small place on the road back toward the bar, a diner she'd driven past 1,000 times without stopping. And she sat at the counter and ordered eggs and toast and coffee, and she sat with it and ate slowly, which was something she almost never did because eating slowly was a luxury that required not being somewhere else and not being needed and not having a 6-year-old who needed the next thing and the next thing after that. She let herself have it for 35 minutes. Then her phone rang, not Rosa, not Michael, a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She answered, Is this Emily Parker? A man's voice. Low measured. Not threatening something else. Something careful. Who's asking? She said. My name is Daniel Holt, he said. Francis Holt's son. Emily set down her coffee cup. I know who you are. Francis mentioned you. She called me this morning, he said. She told me what happened. What you did. A pause. She also told me something else. Something she hasn't told anyone officially yet. I think you need to hear it before she gives her full statement. Emily felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the sense of the ground shifting again, another layer appearing beneath the one she thought was the bottom. Tell me, she said. My mother isn't just a flower shop owner, Daniel said. Before she retired here 20 years ago, she was a county clerk for 14 years. He paused to let that register. During that time, she processed property filings, business registrations, and licensing applications for the entire quarter. Emily waited. She recognized some of the shell company names, Daniel said. The ones Victor Kane uses to collect payments. She recognized them because she processed their original filings. 20 years ago. Another pause. They were filed under the name of a county official, someone who's still in office. The diner went very quiet around Emily, or maybe it was just everything inside her going very quiet. Daniel, she said carefully, does your mother know you're calling me? She asked me to, he said. She said she trusts you. She said you showed up. Emily pressed her hand flat on the diner counter. A county official, 20 years of shell companies. Victor Kane's operation wasn't just a highway protection racket with a personal grudge underneath it. It was connected to something that had been built into the official structure of this county for 2 decades. And Frances Holt had spent 14 years processing the paperwork without knowing what she was processing. And she'd spent 5 months being extorted and looking at those familiar company names on the collection receipts. And she'd known and she'd been carrying it. I need you and your mother to not speak to anyone else until I make one call, Emily said. Can you do that? Yes, Daniel said. Don't call Rosa directly. Wait for me to call you back. 15 minutes. Okay. She hung up and sat with her hand on the counter for exactly 3 seconds. Then she called Michael. I need Rosa's number, she said. The direct one, not the office line. Emily what? Michael. Her voice was very even. Victor Kane isn't the top of this. There's something bigger connected to his operation. A county official, Frances Holt, has documentation. A pause. Direct number. Now. She heard him breathing. Then he gave her the number. Rosa answered in 2 rings. I was about to call you, Rosa said. Frances Holt's son just called me, Emily said. Frances was a county clerk for 14 years. She recognizes the shell company names from Kane's operation. She says they were originally filed under the name of a current county official. Dead silence. The kind of silence that has a different quality than regular silence. The kind that means the person on the other end is recalibrating something very quickly. Emily, Rosa said, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm listening. Don't go to the Holt house, Rosa said. Not yet. Not until I tell you to. I need 30 minutes. Why 30 minutes? Because if what Frances Holt knows is what I think she knows, Rosa said, then the case I've been building for 8 months just turned into something I need to make very specific calls about before we move another inch. Her voice was still controlled, still precise, but underneath it something was happening that Emily recognized because she'd felt it herself in the past 36 hours. The specific electricity of a situation becoming much larger than you'd originally built it to be. 30 minutes. Don't move. Don't call the Holts. Don't tell Michael. Emily's hand tightened on the phone. Don't tell Michael. Not yet, Rosa said. 30 minutes, please. Emily looked at the cold eggs on the diner counter. 30 minutes, she said. She sat in the diner booth and waited and did not eat the cold eggs and did not call Michael and did not call Daniel Holt. And the 30 minutes passed in the particular suspended way that time passed when something was happening that you couldn't see yet but could feel the shape of like weather before it arrives, the specific pressure change that tells you something is coming even when the sky is still clear. At the 28-minute mark, Rosa called back. The county official, Frances identified, Rosa said. His name is Commissioner Paul Garrett. He's been in office for 18 years. He sits on the licensing board that controls every business permit in the corridor. She paused. He's also on the oversight committee for the county sheriff's department. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth. The sheriff's department, she said. Which is why, Rosa said, this case has been difficult to build from inside the county structure, which is why every time I got close to something, I found the path blocked. Another pause. And which is why I'm not calling the county DA anymore. I'm calling the state. Emily sat with this for a moment. Victor Kane, with his grudge in his protection racket, was the surface of something. Under it was Paul Garrett, sitting in his office for 18 years processing permits, overseeing the department that was supposed to stop exactly what he'd been enabling and possibly orchestrating. Under it was 20 years of infrastructure, legal and illegal, woven together so carefully that from the outside it looked like just a quarter with some rough people in it. And Frances Holt had spent 14 years unknowingly filing the paperwork. She's been carrying this alone, Emily said. She didn't know what she had until she saw the collection receipts, Rosa said. And once she knew she was alone with it, a pause. Until you showed up. Emily thought about Frances in her flower shop with the hydrangea photographs and the reading glasses, and the 6 months of fury with nowhere to go. What happens now? Emily said. Now, Rosa said, you go to the Holts. You tell Frances that she was right, and that it matters, and that the right people are going to hear it. And then you let me do the part that I do. Will she be protected? I'm making that call next, Rosa said. Yes. Emily left cash on the diner table for the cold eggs and the coffee and walked out to her car, and she drove toward Frances Holt's flower shop with the morning light still coming in gold from the east. And she thought about something Michael had said, that the system came with the life, because that was true for Frances too. Frances had built a life here, a flower shop, and a community, and a 71-year-old certainty about how things ought to be, and the system she'd accumulated over that life. The 14 years of clerk work, the meticulous records, the foam photographs of hydrangeas, that system had turned out to contain exactly what was needed to break something open that had been sealed for 2 decades. Nobody had planned it that way. That was the thing about people who paid attention and kept records and held on to things because they needed to do something with the feeling, even if they didn't know yet what the something was. You didn't always know what you were building until you needed it. Emily pulled up to the flower shop and got out of her car and walked to the door, and before she knocked, she took one breath. Then she knocked. Frances opened the door immediately, like she'd been standing on the other side of it, which she probably had been. She looked at Emily. Well, Frances said, you were right, Emily said, about all of it, and the right people are going to hear it. Frances Holt pressed her lips together, lifted her chin, blinked twice quickly. Then she stepped back and let Emily in. Frances Holt made tea, not because anyone asked for it, because she was a woman who had spent 71 years understanding that certain conversations required something in your hands, something warm to hold, while the words came out, and she moved around her small back office with the particular efficiency of someone who knew exactly where everything was and had known for a very long time. She set a cup in front of Emily without asking how she took it. I've been waiting for someone to show up for 6 months, Frances said. She sat down across from Emily and folded her hands on the table. Not the police. I didn't think the police would be useful. She said it without bitterness, just as a fact assembled from evidence. I was waiting for a person, someone who had a reason to actually care. You called Rosa's office 6 times, Emily said. I did, Frances said, and every time I got a very polite response and a case number and nothing else. She looked at her tea. I understand now why. If Paul Garrett was connected to the oversight structure, any case that got routed through standard channels would have had friction. She said the word precisely. That's the right word, friction. Things slow down, details get lost, witnesses get discouraged. How long have you known it was Garrett? Emily said. I suspected for 3 months, Frances said. I knew for certain when I got the 4th collection receipt. She stood and went to a filing cabinet in the corner, old metal, the kind that had been in offices for 40 years, and opened the 2nd drawer. She came back with a folder. Inside were receipts, dates, and a separate handwritten document in small, careful cursive. The shell company name on the receipt was Horizon Valley Services, LLC. I processed that filing 21 years ago. I remember it because the paperwork had an error in the registered agent section, and I sent it back for correction twice. I remember every filing I sent back twice. She pushed the folder toward Emily. Paul Garrett was listed as a private individual on the original registration, not in his official capacity, but the handwriting on the correction form was his. I'd seen his handwriting on county documents for 14 years. Emily looked at the handwritten document. Frances's notation was thorough dates, company names, cross-references to filing numbers that had apparently been pulled from memory and verified against whatever records Frances still had access to. You built a case yourself, Emily said. I built a record, Frances said. I didn't know if it would ever be a case, but I needed to do something with knowing, because knowing and doing nothing felt like a kind of participation. She picked up her tea. My late husband was a judge, 32 years on the bench. He used to say that silence in the face of wrongdoing wasn't neutrality, it was a vote. Emily thought about that. She picked up her phone and called Rosa. Rosa answered before the first ring finished. I'm at the state attorney's satellite office, she said. We have a meeting in 40 minutes with the deputy AG. Tell me you have something new. Francis Holt has documentation connecting Garrett to the original shell company registration, Emily said. Hand-notated cross-references to filing numbers. Her own handwriting from 21 years ago verifying the paperwork. A beat of silence. That's original source documentation, Rosa said, and her voice had the specific quality of a person who has just been handed something they didn't dare hope for. That's not circumstantial. That's a paper trail with a human witness who created the paper. She's ready to present it, Emily said, in person on record today. Can you get her to the state attorney's office in the next 2 hours? Emily looked at Francis. Francis was already standing, ready reaching for her jacket on the hook behind the door. We'll be there, Emily said. They drove separately because Francis insisted on taking her own car, which Emily understood immediately and completely. Frances Holt was a woman who drove herself, had always driven herself, and was not about to stop now. Emily followed her, watching the older woman's sedan moving at a steady 15 miles over the speed limit, which was the first indication Emily had that Frances was considerably more activated than she appeared. They pulled into the state attorney's satellite office at 12:47. Rosa was waiting at the entrance. She looked at Francis. Francis looked at her. You didn't call me back when I called your office, Francis said. I know, Rosa said. That was a failure on my part and I'm sorry for it. Francis considered this. All right, she said, well, let's go in. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Emily was in it for the first 40, giving her account of how she'd come to Francis, what Francis had told her, the sequence of events from the bar to the documentation. Then Rosa asked her to wait in the outer office, and she sat in a plastic chair with a bad cup of coffee from a machine, and she waited. She texted Michael at state attorney's office. 2 hours. Everything okay at bar? He texted back 4 minutes later. Dale says the Cumin question has been resolved in his favor. Don't tell him you agreed with him. I'll never hear the end of it. Emily smiled at her phone. Then Frances came through. She has original documentation connecting Garrett to Kane's companies. His response took longer this time. 8 minutes. Then how long has she been sitting on that, Emily? 6 months. Michael, she came in alone. Emily, she did. Another pause. Michael, people are something else. Emily, yeah. She put her phone down and drank the bad coffee and thought about what Michael had said, not the words, but the register of them. The specific tone of a man who had spent 20 years watching people choose between fear and something harder than fear, and who was still surprised when they chose the harder thing. Still moved by it. That he could still be moved by it after everything he'd seen was, she thought, one of the more important things about him. Rosa came out at 3:20. She sat down beside Emily. Commissioner Paul Garrett is being placed under investigation by the state attorney's office as of 1 hour ago, Rosa said. Formal charges, pending review of Francis's documentation, in our existing file, which they're treating as a combined case. She was very controlled, but something was happening behind her eyes. The specific contained energy of a person who has just done something they'd been working toward for a long time. Victor Kane's charges are being elevated from county to state jurisdiction. His bail is being revoked pending the expanded investigation. Emily exhaled. Frances, she said. She's still in there, Rosa said. She asked to finish her full account before she stopped. She said she'd waited 6 months to say it, and she was going to say all of it. A pause. She also said to tell you she'd like to come to the bar for soup sometime. She said her husband's anniversary is next month, and she used to take him there. Emily pressed her lips together, held it for a moment. I'll save her usual table, Emily said. Rosa looked at her. You doing okay? Tired, Emily said. Really tired. That's appropriate, Rosa said. You've been running at emergency speed for 36 hours. Is it done? Emily said. I know the legal process isn't done, but is the immediate thing, is it done? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Kane's back in custody as of about an hour ago, she said. This time bail is a different conversation. Garrett is under investigation and has been notified, which means he's currently in a room with lawyers and not making calls. She looked at Emily. The window of maximum risk closed about 90 minutes ago. You and Michael and your witnesses are in a different position now. Emily leaned her head back against the wall. The plastic chair was profoundly uncomfortable, and the coffee had been terrible, and the fluorescent lighting of the state attorney's waiting room was the kind that made everyone look slightly ill. And she thought, this is one of the best moments I've had in recent memory. She drove back toward the bar. She called ahead, and Michael picked up on the second ring, and she told him everything. Garrett, the state attorney, came back in custody, the elevated charges. He listened without interrupting, which was how she knew he was absorbing all of it, rather than reacting to any one piece of it. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come back to the bar. I'll have the coffee ready, not the machine, the good stuff I keep for when it actually matters." She got there at 4:15. The bar was in the middle of its late afternoon lull, the period between the lunch crowd clearing out and the dinner people arriving, when the light came in at a low angle, and the place had a particular quality of stillness that Emily had always liked. Dale was still at the end of the bar. He looked up when she walked in. "Heard things got interesting," he said. "Where'd you hear that?" she said. He looked into his coffee. "Small town." "Things got interesting," she said. "They're significantly less interesting now." "Good," Dale said, and that was apparently the full extent of the conversation he wanted to have about it, which Emily appreciated deeply. Michael came out of the back with 2 mugs. Real coffee, the kind he kept in a separate canister that Emily had always assumed was just his personal preference and had never questioned. He set one in front of her and kept one and sat across the bar from her. She drank it. It was considerably better than anything the state attorney's office had offered. "Francis's documentation," Michael said. "How solid is it?" "Rosa used the words original source documentation," Emily said, "with a human witness who created it." Michael nodded slowly. 21 years, he said. "Garrett's been running this for 21 years. "Not all of it was Kane," Emily said. "Kane's been on the courier for maybe 2 years. Garrett had other arrangements before that. Francis thinks there have been at least 3 different operators over 2 decades, all running through the same shell infrastructure." Michael turned his coffee cup. 3 operators, 20 years. How many businesses over that time?" "Rosa's going to map it," Emily said. "It's going to be a significant number." They sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. Not just Victor Kane and a personal grudge, not just a protection racket on a desert highway, but 2 decades of a county official using the structure of legitimate authority to squeeze money from the people he was supposed to serve. Small business owners, working people, people like Sandra and Tom and Earl and Francis, people who'd built their livelihoods with their own hands and had then spent months or years carrying the weight of being preyed upon in silence because they believed no one would come. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Emily said. "Yeah, what?" "The candy jar," she said, "behind the register." Michael looked at her. "You've been filling that jar since you opened this place," she said. "I looked it up once. You've had that candy jar for 16 years. Every kid who comes in here with their parents gets a piece of candy. You don't make a thing of it. It's just there. It's always been there." She looked at her coffee. "That's the same impulse. The candy and the midnight check-ins and Randy in the pickup truck and the call that brought 40 people to a parking lot. It's all the same thing." Michael was quiet. "Carol used to say I overcomplicated simple things," he said finally. "She said the only question that ever mattered was, is there something you can do, and is doing it right?" He turned his cup. "The candy jar is something I can do, and it's right, so it's there." Emily thought about Lily's plastic horses on the nightstand, about the chapter books, about a 6-year-old who asked if the people her mother worked with were nice because she'd learned from watching her mother to ask that question first. "Lily wants to come in sometime," Emily said. "She's been asking. She knows I work here, but she's never actually been inside." "Kids are welcome," Michael said. "She's going to want to show you horse pictures on my phone," Emily said. "Like a lot of horse pictures." "I have time," he said. "She'll also want to push the buttons on the jukebox." "Everyone wants to push the buttons on the jukebox," he said. "That's what it's for." "It skips on track 4, Emily said. "Always has," he said. "I've fixed it 3 times. It skips on track 4 regardless. At this point, I think it's a feature." Emily drank her coffee and let herself sit in the ordinary warmth of the conversation for a moment, the ordinary human warmth of it, because it had been 36 hours of almost nothing ordinary, and she needed this the way you needed water. Then her phone buzzed. Rosa, she answered. Two things, Rosa said. First, Commissioner Garrett has retained counsel and will be formally interviewed by the state attorney tomorrow morning. His attorney has already indicated they intend to cooperate, which usually means they've done the math and decided cooperation is the better option. A pause, which from our perspective is an excellent outcome because cooperation means documentation of the full scope of the operation, 21 years of it. And the second thing, Emily said, Kane's attorney called the state office 40 minutes ago. Rosa said, he's offering a full accounting of the operation in exchange for a sentencing consideration. He'll name every official contact, every payment, every arrangement he's aware of over the past 2 years. Her voice was very even. Emily, he's going to name Garrett and probably 2 others. He's going to give us the operating structure from the inside. Emily looked at Michael. Victor Kane is cooperating, she said. Michael set his coffee cup down. Why? He said loud enough for Rosa to hear. Because he ran the math, Rosa said, and figured out that Garrett is going to cooperate too, and whoever cooperates first gets the better deal. And Victor Kane, whatever else he is, has always been very good at math. A pause. The personal grievance against Michael is apparently less important than the sentencing calculus, which is exactly what I expected. Emily thought about Victor in the bar 2 nights ago. The certainty of him, the way he'd sat on the stool like the world was his furniture. She thought about 25 years of a grudge carried like something precious, and she thought about how fast it became negotiable when the right pressure was applied. Is there anything else you need from us tonight? Emily said. No, Rosa said. Go home. Be with your daughter. I'll call tomorrow morning with updates. A pause. Emily, what you did in the past 36 hours, the statements you gathered, the connections you made. Francis Holt, I want you to understand that without that, the case doesn't move today. It moves eventually, maybe, but not today. Another pause. Today was you. Emily held the phone. It was a lot of people, she said. It was, Rosa said. You were the one who showed up to all of them. She hung up. Michael was looking at her. Kane's cooperating, she said again. I heard. Garrett's going to cooperate too to get ahead of him. I heard that too. So basically, Emily said, 2 men who spent years terrifying people into silence are now competing to tell their secrets fastest. Michael looked at the bar for a moment. Yeah, he said, that happens sometimes. People who built their power on other people's fear don't tend to be particularly loyal to anything except their own interests. He picked up his cup, which is ultimately why that kind of power doesn't hold. Emily nodded. She thought about something and then decided to say it because she'd spent enough of the past 2 days operating on instinct, and good instinct should be named when you had it. Michael, she said, when this is fully over, and I know it's not fully over, I know there's months of legal process, but when it gets to the other side of that, what happens to the bar? He looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, people are going to know more about your background now, she said. Not just rumors, actual public record. The testimony you gave today is going to be part of a state case. People are going to know you were road captain for the Hells Angels and that you helped dismantle an operation 20 years ago and that you had 40 riders in your parking lot 2 nights ago. She held his gaze. Some people are going to have opinions about that. Michael was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said, they will. Are you ready for that? He looked out at the bar, at the stools and the mismatched chairs and the jukebox and the candy jar and the regulars who were starting to filter back in for the dinner hour, taking their assigned spots, with the comfortable certainty of people who knew where they belonged. I've been ready for it for 20 years, he said. I just didn't know it yet. He looked back at her. You know what I've learned? People who care about who you actually are will see who you actually are. And people who are looking for a reason to decide you're a certain thing will find their reason regardless of what you do. He straightened. I'd rather be known accurately and judged accordingly than spend another day managing what people know. Emily thought about that. She decided, a very specific kind of freedom. The kind you got to the other side of fear. Not the absence of consequences, but the willingness to face them clearly with your name on your account, with nothing hidden that would cost more to keep hidden than to reveal. The vest, she said. What about it? You put it back in the cabinet the other night, she said, locked it. Yes. Was that the right call? Michael thought about it seriously, the way he thought about everything that mattered. Not fast, not performatively, but with real weight given to the question. The vest isn't who I am anymore, he said, but it's part of how I got to who I am. So it belongs somewhere that's mine, somewhere I can look at it if I need to remember something or take it out if something requires it. He paused. But it doesn't belong on display. It's not a trophy and it's not a warning. It's just history. Emily nodded. She drank the last of her coffee and set the cup down. I have to pick up Lily in 45 minutes, she said. Go, he said. I'll be in tomorrow at 9. Route 7 coffee, he said. Obviously, she said. She put on her jacket. The bar was filling up now, the dinner hour, people finding their seats, the particular comfortable noise of a place being used by people who were glad to be in it. Dale had been replaced by a different regular at the end of the stool, but he'd left his coffee cup, which meant he'd be back, which was the bar equivalent of leaving your hat on a chair. Emily stopped at the door. She looked back at Michael, who was already moving behind the bar, already working, already doing the specific thing he'd been doing for 16 years in this place. His hands on the familiar surfaces, his attention on the room. The candy jar, visible on the shelf behind him, full, because it was always full. Michael, she said. He looked up. Carol was right about this place, she said. She said it was going to be something special. He looked at her. And for the first time, not the almost smile, not the controlled almost something she'd learned to read in over 3 years. He actually smiled, full and real and briefly unguarded, the smile of a man who had spent 20 years building something good and was for one moment allowing himself to know it. Yeah, he said. She usually was. Emily walked out into the late afternoon. 6 weeks later, Victor Kane pled guilty to extortion, racketeering witness, tampering, and physical assault. The plea incorporated his full cooperation with the state investigation, naming Paul Garrett and 2 other county officials as participants in a systematic corruption scheme that had operated for 21 years and affected 43 businesses along the corridor. Commissioner Paul Garrett resigned from office 4 days before formal charges were filed. His attorney negotiated a cooperation agreement. He was ultimately charged with 18 counts of racketeering, abuse of public trust, and conspiracy, and he pled guilty to 14 of them. The money, the collection payments from over 2 years of Kane's operation, was subject to a civil recovery process. Sandra Reyes got her $800 a month back plus interest. Francis Holt got 4 months at $600. Earl Daxton got his window replaced from the recovery fund and received a certified letter confirming that the bait shop had been removed from all extortion records, which he framed and put on the wall beside a photograph of his wife. Tom Briggs never untied his apron at the wrong moment again. The Desert Rose Bar stayed open through all of it. People heard the story, the real story, not the rumored fragments, but the actual shape of what had happened. And some people had opinions about Michael Walker's past. A few stopped coming in, but more people came who hadn't come before, drawn by the specific thing that people were always drawn to, whether they could name it or not, the sense that a place was run by someone who meant it. Someone who had weighed what mattered and chosen accordingly, not once in a dramatic moment, but thousands of times over thousands of ordinary days. The neon sign kept buzzing. The jukebox kept skipping on track 4. The candy jar stayed full. Emily brought Lily in on a Saturday in October, 5 weeks after the last hearing. Lily wore her best jeans and a t-shirt with a horse on it, and she spent the first 10 minutes of the visit examining the jukebox with the focused intensity of a structural engineer. And then she pushed buttons until the thing lit up, and then she turned to Michael with the complete confidence of a 6-year-old who had already decided about a person based on available evidence and said, "My mom says you're one of the best people she knows." Michael crouched down so he was at her level. "Your mom is very smart," he said. "I know," Lily said. "She knows where everything is, even in the dark." She looked at the candy jar. "Is that candy?" "Help yourself," he said. Lily considered the options with great seriousness and selected a butterscotch. Michael looked up at Emily over Lily's head. Emily was looking at her daughter and thinking about the night she'd stood behind a bar with nothing between herself and a man who thought her silence could be purchased, and how she'd said 3 words that turned out to be true in every direction she hadn't yet understood. And how everything that followed had come from that Sandra's tears and Tom's apron and Earl's framed letter and Francis's anniversary dinner at the table Emily had saved for her and the 40 riders who had come, because one man had spent 20 years giving people reasons to show up. She looked at Michael. He looked back at her. And in that small, imperfect, entirely real bar at the edge of a forgotten Arizona highway, surrounded by the ordinary evidence of everything it had taken to get there, the fixed chairs and the full candy jar, and the buzzing sign and the jukebox that always skipped on track 4, the story closed the way the best stories close. Not with a return to what was, with the beginning of what it had always been capable of becoming. The Desert Rose was not a famous bar. It was not written up in newspapers or marked on any map that mattered. It was a place where tired people came and felt something that was harder to name than comfort and more durable than luck. The specific feeling of being in a place that was held together by someone who had decided deliberately and repeatedly that holding it together was worth it. And that was enough. That had always been exactly